Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Sunitha Sandeep. She is a phenomenal professional. She's currently working for Amazon Web Services as a technical program manager. She was a senior technical program manager for Bloomberg, a senior software development specialist for Yahoo, and she's also graduated from Washington State with a Master of Science in Computer Engineering. Now, here's the flip side of it. She's also a certified inner transformational and integrative wellness coach. She's a certified meditation and mindfulness teacher, as well as a certified positive psychology practitioner. So this is going to be a wonderful conversation and confirmation of this transformational coach in Sunitha. Sunitha, glad to have you here. This is going to be fun. I can tell it already.
So excited to be here. Thank you so much, Zen. I am truly grateful to be here.
You know, you've got some really interesting kind of a dual inner and outer thing going on here that is perfect for the kind of conversations that we have here.
Yeah.
Now, in the beginning of this, granted, you went through the normal corporate realms and conditioning and programming and education and getting ready to, really launch a career. But there was another side of you from this inner perspective that came out later. Where was it when you were younger? How did you first become aware of this inner awareness that you have and how it was connected to everything else? But I'm wondering if you could even really talk about it when you were younger too.
Yeah, no, I mean, now that I go back, I can go back and then think about how I was as a kid versus
Sure.
now how I am. I loved finishing up all my work sooner, like my homework, whatever I needed to do. And believe it or not, every day I would spend like 15 minutes lying down on my bed and looking at my ceiling, the fan and the ceiling. That's all. And
Kind
then
of Rene Descartes.
what is it?
Kind of like a Rene Descartes.
It's just looking at the ceiling because I would, because I would, it was an act of doing nothing. And I didn't have to do anything, but I could just be and just look at it. And I couldn't explain why I was doing what I was doing. And then even certain times I would just go to the terrace, like in India, like we had a big terrace that I could just sit and watch the sky. I could just lie down on the terrace on the concrete, and I would just sit and watch the sky, just look at the sky gazing. And it was not that I could do it for hours, but I would do it for like 15-20 minutes sometime. And at that time, I didn't know how to put that into words, but I was probably doing because I felt very connected right. to myself and connected to everything around me. And this went on for a long time. And I think somewhere I kind of lost in touch with it. I see like, as life progresses, you're busy. And because I didn't have an understanding of what was happening when I was doing that, I was like, okay, this is something and I'll do it or not do it. But then later on in my life, I remember anytime that I would get like a free time, I would just sit and do nothing. And my husband would be like, how can you just sit and do nothing? I'm like, oh, I love doing nothing. And this was before even I got into understanding of what doing nothing was. I would just sit and do nothing.
It's a phenomenal
and I would love to do, and I would love for those moments to sit and do nothing. Like, can you believe it? Like something within me was like always wanted to just sit and just be. That's all, with nothing going on in my mind or list of things that I need to go chase after or so. And but of course, the corporate world is on one side. You come
much
from
later. Now, as a kid, though, this is really a phenomenal awareness. There's this whole in most cultures, most spiritual texts, there's this idea, this notion of being silent
Yeah.
and being quiet within. And that's where, this nothingness is, that
Yeah.
from which everything else comes.
Comes.
So
Yeah.
to be able to, as a child, have those moments of, and I think that many of us do, we just,
We
get-
all do.
we
We
forget,
all, we
right?
forget.
And we get caught up in the
Yeah.
world and forget being like a child in
Yeah.
that respect. We never have to lose that. And the
Yeah.
regaining of it is, I think, important for a lot. And hopefully that's happening more often today,
Yes.
especially with what's been happening the last few years.
I know.
But
I know.
as a kid, when you were um, in these places, or in this place, what kinds of things would come up for you in this stream of consciousness that you would engage in that nothingness?
Yeah. For me, oh my God, you're asking me a very deep question, which I don't even know how I
Of
can answer.
course, it's what I do.
Um, what used to come is just a deep trust that everything is okay. A very simple, extraordinarily ordinary,
Mm.
very ordinary, right? It felt mostly like a connection to just everything around me. Um, there
Now,
was
did you have a
nothing.
sense of a basking in it?
I couldn't even. I mean, I don't know what I would at that moment of
Oh
time, but
yeah,
I
it
think
was
as a
pretty much
kid,
ineffable as a child, right? You don't
as a
have the,
child,
yeah,
I
you don't have
wouldn't
the
have
language.
any, yeah, the language, but I think the more and more I was trying to go there meant that I think I was getting more energy, more confidence and trust in myself, in a deeper part of myself, not in like, what I do or what I didn't do. And there was always something within me that I could get back to no matter what was happening. And I think that for me was the missing part
Mhm.
in all the things that happened over the course of years. And then now I'm again like settling back into that part of myself, which is nothing needs to change. I've done my home, like as a kid, nothing needs to change now. I've done my homework. I don't need to do anything. Nothing's gone my mind. And I can just be here, just look at, and just I think an experience of it, an intimate experience of just watching the sky. That's all I can say, Zen. Like, there's nothing more to like, because if I probably add any other language or words to that, it'll take away from that beautiful intimacy with nothingness.
So perfectly said. The intimacy with nothingness. That's just oh wow, what a pregnant phrase, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's true. When we create words, when we draw words out and we label, we title, we categorize, we
yeah,
put it in a box, we miss the essence of what it is in that nondescript inner sense of being with
yeah, yeah.
that
So
you're
true.
describing, that intimacy with nothingness, right?
Intimacy with nothingness. Yeah.
And we don't, do you think that we as humanity kind of don't understand what that really means, or that we haven't really recognized that the reality that we live half
Yeah.
inside and half outside?
Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody would have had this experience as we just spoke about it. Every person goes through, it's a natural state. It's just a natural state. You can be intimate with anything that you're doing. It doesn't have to be based on an action.
Right.
And over the course of years, we have completely forgotten that. And now, because we want to go back to that, our mind tries to put a label to it,
Hmm.
right? And then we put a label because some way for the mind to remember, oh, I am here. I'm not exactly in that intimacy currently. And then it just needs a name to put to go
Yeah,
to
to
that.
trigger you. right?
Yeah, to
To
trigger
train
us.
your
And
thinking.
it's helpful too, and it's really helpful because it's some kind of a, like, Ramana Maharshi and all, they just talk about the self-remembrance. All that is needed is self-remembrance. But
Right.
how do you remember what that self is? It has to trigger with something. So the mind looks for something to cling on to go to
Mhm.
that place. But the problem that happens is the mind clings on to the thing that triggers it in a good way, right? Maybe gratitude helps me to get there, so now I'm going to go cling on to the gratitude word, and no matter what's happening, I'll always be grateful. But that's not what's called for.
Mhm.
That's exactly not what's called for, right?
Right.
And so then we make each of these words as an absolute teaching by itself and cling on to it, and then we miss that intimacy with everything, and but starting with probably nothing and then everything.
Mhm. I
um
think, and there maybe there's another word that just came to mind, emptiness.
Beautiful, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
There's this purity in emptiness
yeah,
where you're in total faith, trust, love,
yeah,
however you want to call that, and
yeah,
those three kind of encapsulate it, right?
yeah, yeah.
Where you're just totally secure and everything's okay.
Everything's okay. Yeah.
Now, in this, do you think that there's oh, maybe a reticence? What I'm thinking and how I'm trying to frame this question is that when at 18, I had a spiritual awakening. I prayed to know what truth was and was willing to die for it, and then had this really bizarre experience of actually being asked if I was willing to die for what I believed in, and going through the process of
Yeah.
by all written documentation that I died. I went into the light and beyond, told what I was here to do, and came back. Now, of course, I told my parents about it, and they immediately had me see a psychiatrist. Fortunately, the psychiatrist had been doing his own work, and he understood what I'd gone through and framed it as a spiritual awakening rather than some psychoses,
Yeah.
right? And so in the process, though, he said, I don't understand why it's happened so young. I was 18.
Wow.
He says
Must
most
be
people
very
don't
tough.
go through it till their
Yeah.
mid 40s, if they
Yeah.
ever do. Now, at that time, I didn't really understand what that meant. I just kind of stuck in my mind, and then realized in my mid 40s, oh, let's see, career change, um, empty nesting. Um, there's all kinds of 40 something events, right, in your
Right.
maturation process that you go through that then, like you're saying, it kind of gets you to want to go back to that intimacy with
That intimacy with
nothingness.
nothingness. So beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, is that what you've experienced, and kind of, because you really, I mean, how does it feel to be an overachiever?
There's
Right?
always a dark side to it. There's always a dark side, right? So,
Achiever.
and I think it's got to do a lot of archetypal patterns. That's what I call, more from a psychology, more from, and now we are shifting our talk to more on the human side of it,
Sure.
which is a lot on the being perfectionist, being a people pleaser, either setting too tight boundaries or not setting boundaries, trying to have everything under control. Like, I want it this way, and trying to own everything, try to take responsibility for everything. And for me, all of those archetypal personality patterns really helped me to take me from a place where I was to take me to a place where I thought I needed to achieve certain things. It really helped me. But
Now,
then for the
was it the
rest,
curiosity of how those reflected aspects of yourself that you could see immediately, maybe not some that, the invisible, because we always have those things we're not aware of yet.
yeah.
Did that give you the opportunity to kind of take a multi-perspective view of self?
Nothing. So I was completely cut off from all of those, like I was experiencing as a small kid, like, just sitting and just being with myself. I was completely cut off, and it was the next part of my journey was all about chasing success. I needed this. I needed to get this. This is what life was for me.
And you had
Going
quite a
after
journey
things.
with that.
And I had quite a journey with that. Perfectionist, even at my workplace, I was doing pretty well. Um, and a lot of awards, like, a state rank in India, pretty good. I was doing pretty good on that. But then All of these came at a cost because I was also developing these things of anxiety, like
Mm.
a stress. I didn't know how to handle things. I always had to like get certain things, and I would do anything. Like I would go to any extent of working really hard. I became a workaholic. I would do anything to get what I wanted because that's how I was kind of trained or I was conditioned, right?
Now
And
that was with moral and ethical considerations, right? Not just
yeah,
anything, right?
yeah, that's just how we all are. In fact, probably 90% of the human population, that's how we are conditioned. Like do, like one list after the other, one thing after the other.
Yeah, we
And
forget
for me,
about
the
the we.
shift, yeah, and then for me, the shift happened when I talk about this in my TEDx talk. Shift happened when I go into a medical surgery, and after I get up, like I realized there was a nerve damage, and my left arm from my elbow to my fingers, I couldn't feel it. I couldn't move it. And that was the first time I felt that I was out of control. Like, no matter what I could do, no matter how much I could be empowered in life, no matter how much I can struggle and do and succeed and do anything, there was something else that will just happen in life. Ups and downs will happen in life. But was I prepared to face that situation? Absolutely not. I
Mhm.
was not prepared. I did not know. I did not know how to gracefully fail, whether in my professional life or in my personal life or in my inner life. I did not know how to fail.
Well,
I did not know how to accept life the way it was. I did not know how to embrace the life that is given to me. I did not know how to take the reality.
you have an interesting phrase, the grace of
Yeah.
failure, right? Um, and that's true. We often, eh, eh, and there's uh, quite a bit of evidence that most of us tend to be more self-deprecating in our quiet moments than anything else.
Yeah.
And there's this constant battle inside of our heads, or this self-deprecating, beating yourself up because you're not this, you're not that, you're not enough, you've risen to the imposter syndrome now, and you
Yeah.
don't want to be discovered, because if they did, then they wouldn't
Something
like
they'll,
you, right?
yeah.
Well, that's all a facade that we put up based on what the outer teachings,
Yeah.
right? How did you discover this disparity and begin to kind of ease your way back into that experience of nothingness? Because it's
Yeah.
obvious that you had, and with your TED talk and the development that you've done, and switching, or including now, not necessarily switching, but being inclusive of the transformational aspects of.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did go through a lot of healing, a traumatic healing, more on the somatic level. And I think this is where I want to go next for people, because even with an awakening experience, it's just an experience. This is how I put it.
Mhm.
Even the experience of nothingness, even the experience of hitting that emptiness and feeling that like feeling like death, right? Wherein
That's an
completely you
experience. It's not a
surrender.
belief. Here's the distinction I'd like to make, because a
Yeah,
lot of us have these belief systems, BS, right, that get in the way
yeah,
of the experience. And I
of
would
the
think
actual
that we
experience.
often would need an experience system to
Yeah,
base our
correct.
lives on. And to me, it seems like we can't think our way through a system built on vibrations.
Yeah,
We need to sense our way through it. And that's an experience.
it's an
It's not
experience.
thinking.
Yeah, yeah, it's totally, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's at the end of the day, it's just an experience.
Hmm.
And right, so for me, whether I would be, if we would take this as a spectrum, whether I would be on the complete identified with like a negative thought or something like an actual form,
Mhm.
Or I could go on the other side of the spectrum and then be identified as a formlessness. At the end of the day, both are an experience for me. And I think this is what my journey has been, is not to get identified in the form or in the formlessness. Because a lot of times what I have seen in the spiritual community Zen is we go all the way from here. I'm not the mind, I'm not the body, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that. Right? Everything is an illusion on one side. And then we go into the formlessness. But then they get stuck in the formlessness because the embodiment is a very difficult concept, or not even a concept, it's a process.
Mhm. Well,
Very difficult process. The healing, getting whatever we have learned about ourselves, the insights that we have had, the aha realizations, the aha moments that we have had, taking that and putting that in your relationships, in how you behave with your spouse, in how you act with your kids, in how you work in your workplace, in how I teach my or I coach my people. It's a whole new thing. The
mhm.
businesses, success and failures of businesses, right? It's a whole new embodiment, right?
Right. And it is an embodiment that this is a distinction that we, most of us, it appears, we live from the shoulders up,
Yeah,
right? We're thinking, we're doing, we're not necessarily being. Being includes the entire body, which is connected to everything. And there's, quantum physics is now, showing we're all
yeah,
vibration. Everybody's going, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense, right?
yeah,
Even though here we are in these physical forms that don't seem like they're empty space, or
yeah,
most, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
yet we're able to configure consciously this capacity to engage life and be in both those places, the nothingness and the form, right?
together at the same time,
Exactly. Now, this is
simultaneously.
the where I was leading with that was the question: do you feel that this is the embodiment of a, let's say, cosmic consciousness or infinite intelligence condensed into a form
Yeah,
with a specific vibration or frequency that then fits into something greater perfectly? We're just in the process of discovering that,
yeah,
right? All
it's
this multidimensional consciousness concepts, and like you were talking about the spiritual community, right? They get lost in all of this stuff. Well, how do you embody this? How do you
yeah,
bring the being into this reality in a more full
yeah,
sense
yeah, yeah.
and
No,
awareness
beautiful.
of what is available and how we can allow this, as you alluded to earlier, natural order within us to
Yeah,
permeate our lives? How do you, uh, from what you're saying so far, it appears that you're of that same ilk and mind flow, for lack of a better perception, right?
yeah,
How
yeah,
do you incorporate that? What are the kinds of ways that
yeah,
are articulatable,
yeah,
that are maybe simple enough to understand? Because I know
yeah,
I can get really, I have a huge vocabulary, and it's hard to bring that down sometimes. However, we all experience this very simply. We just have all this complexity wrapped around it.
yeah,
How do you get through that and
yeah.
share that from where you're at?
Yeah. So multiple levels, multiple layers, right? So it's just like something is hidden with multiple layers over it. And I think to clear things at every layer, different techniques are used. And you
Hmm.
want to probably use the right techniques at the right time. We don't want to take like a hammer versus like, a small pin to do some like
Okay.
a work, right? So both tools are needed,
We
that they
we don't
have
want a
to be
sledgehammer when stippling is necessary.
exactly. Yeah. So we need to be able to identify what tool to use when. right? And some of us have, like, maybe like few steps ahead of somebody else, and we can just say, that's probably not the tool that you want to use. And tools do have their own use.
Mhm.
Somebody who's dealing a lot with the personality aspect, I usually start with more a mental based aspects. This perspective, that perspective, mindset. This is a very common thing that we start with.
Right. That's how we
Right. Yeah.
think. That's where
That's how we
becoming
think, right?
aware of how we think and then the thoughts that we think. This is a real difficult challenge for, to begin to manage those 70,000 thoughts a day that we
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How do we observe those, first of
Yeah.
all, and not feel like, oh, I've got to go into meditation in order to do that.
Yeah.
I, that to me just doesn't, you can self-monitor, right?
You can self-monitor just by the awareness of your mental thoughts and so on. So you can develop different perspectives. So for me, the whole journey to take them on is again on a spectrum. Let them get used to the different perspectives,
Mhm.
just at the mental level. Then what happens with this is now the mind is open, because at the end of the day, this whole journey is about being open, being willing, being more tender, and being more vulnerable. What can
Exactly.
we
That
do?
last word specifically is, I
Vulnerable.
think, key to the rest of it, vulnerability, right?
That's all, right? So at each level, as how we humans are, because we start from the surface level and then go into the internal code level. So at the surface level, which we can start from the mind, which is a way easy to connect to literally everybody, mindset, the 101 of your transformational journey. So take them through a spectrum of, oh, I thought this, but there is this also possible. So you take them to experience different thoughts at the surface level of mental thoughts.
Mhm.
Then once they feel they're more saturated at that level, take them a little bit lower below their shoulders, get them into more on the emotional intelligence, that I'm feeling angry and it's okay. I
Right.
can also feel love and that's okay. So again, saying that it doesn't have to be always feeling good and feeling happy and feeling joyful.
Or feeling self-deprecating, or
Def-
thinking self-deprecating thoughts because you're feeling a certain way. Oh, I
yeah,
shouldn't be feeling that way. This is,
exactly.
again,
Yeah,
more of that um misjudgment. We
yeah.
just, it's that self-criticism that keeps us from just being okay.
Just
You're
being okay. Yeah, that's the big shift, because all we do is we want to avoid certain feelings, certain emotions. So now what the second step, the second layer, is to take them through a spectrum of all emotions, the human emotions, and then say it's okay, right? And I think in the process, what happens is that our nervous system and our body starts getting used to being angry. We don't have to express, but we can feel angry. We don't have to express our negative thoughts, but it's okay to have negative thoughts. They all are happening on a spectrum, right? So
Yeah,
now,
and the difference being that it's okay to have them, just don't embody them,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's that one, you can sense it, that doesn't mean you have to be it.
exactly. Exactly, right? Yeah. But then I think it's more so for the body to be okay to
Mhm.
feel all of these. That's where the somatic level comes in. Now the next level is more at the gut level,
Right.
which is more on what sensations, what is, because usually when I work with women and even with myself, all boils down to the fears at the base chakras, the root, the just about the root chakra and so on and so on.
Solar, sacral, and um, root, right?
Root, yeah.
Those are
The lower part of the chakras, which is all about feeling of worthlessness, feeling of loneliness, feeling of not being seen enough, or feeling of that something is going to happen, I'm going to die, right? So
and then the other side of that is total freedom.
it's total freedom. Yeah, it's total freedom. Yeah, yeah.
Now,
So, and
this
it's,
makes sense. There's an indigenous philosophy that I heard some years ago, and I bring this up on occasion, in the three brains, right? The gut, the heart, and the head. So this is kind of and maybe that has to do with groupings of chakras as well.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
I think
assume
so
that's
too. I think
possible.
so. Yeah, because the same situation can be experienced one way in the head, can be a different perspective through our emotional body, and completely differently through our gut. And even within the gut, like, a little bit upper stomach can feel it certain way, that the lower stomach can feel it certain way.
Right.
Um, so
We may
again,
interpret the same sensation, right?
yeah,
Anxiety on one end
yeah.
and anticipation
On
on
the
the
other, yeah, on the other end, exactly. It's the same. There's a thin line there. That's all
other.
it is. That's all it is. So again, taking them through these layers and clearing them as much as possible. Then slowly, I think the mind and the body kind of gets used to this. Oh, oh,
Mhm.
oh. It's like this was not something that I did not know before. I was always this. This is, this feels so natural. I didn't have to, like, because any amount of work that you do, anything that you do will take you away from that truth of yours. Anything that you do, even like, oh, I need to be doing my practices so that I can get there, or that feel there, is going to be counterintuitive. Because I think at that stage when we come, the only thing that we have to realize is, I don't think I can do anything, and where is the complete loss of personal will. I think that the whole journey is a loss of personal will, the willpower and the personal will. um,
And yet, for me anyway, I'll just speak from my own experience, when that perception, that understanding of letting go,
yeah,
the personal will, right? There's another will that becomes present, that seems
yes,
like we were talking earlier about the perfected form, fit, and function in the world, right? That's another will that uh, seems to be at that base level natural state of the frequency that we carry, that has all that data that we haven't been able to unpack because we haven't been quiet enough
yeah.
to do so.
That's all it is. That's all it is. That's all. It's that simple, but it's not easy.
Oh,
It's very simple. That's all it
it
is, right? And then I think we can give a lot of words and meanings to the whole journey, right? Because in this journey, to let go of something that is here, we take a perspective of here, the kind of opposite perspective, right? And then we think, oh, this is the perspective now. But then it's neither of those perspectives or both of those perspectives in the moment. I can be angry or I can be very loving. But what operates in the moment needs to be aligned with what I want to do. Anger as an emotion has its own intelligence.
Mhm.
Love as an emotion has its own intelligence. Presence has its own intelligence. Complete let go has its own intelligence. But then we try to hold on to either of these all the time and then say that's the way to be. No, the way to be is actually undefined. The way to be defines itself in the moment by moment by moment experience. It's like a fluidity of our consciousness, wherever it wants to go, whenever it wants, in the moment, because I don't know what's going to happen. None
Right.
of us probably know what's going to happen in the next moment.
We have perception of what might
Might
happen,
happen.
although there's all these different probabilities, and until we show up and engage, we're
Yeah,
not going to know.
yeah,
And there's again that feeling, that sensation that begins with the gut, right? Where what needs to be the kind of questions that we ask.
yeah,
For instance, how may I be of best service,
yeah.
right? Not just, and this is encompassing both service to self and service to others, because the ultimate service to self is service to others. That's
Other.
that community,
Yeah, yeah,
the cohesion of the energy that takes form in a more perfected, or let's say a better order that
yeah,
supports all rather than singles or a few. And so there's this, do you see this happening on a massive scale, where this understanding is becoming more present? And if so, how do you see that playing out? Is there this interplanetary civilization that is emerging through those who are open and aware now that is helping to shift
Yeah.
this consciousness, this overall consciousness into a new age?
I definitely think so. I see that happening with many women that I'm working with. I see that happen with so many people. There is a level of openness that is happening. But I think here is where I differ with respect to service, because somehow the word service has been romanticized a lot.
True.
It's
Absolutely.
like if somebody comes for the first session of my coaching, um, it's more like a pageant answer for me. Like, what is it that you want to do? I want to serve others. I want to serve, right? It's just been romanticized a little bit because we just feel we need to be doing. We need to be doing. However, that's where I want to go.
Sure.
There's a deeper part within us that wants to do that no matter what, because
Right.
that is who we are at the deeper level. But then the service is not the way our mind has projected what service is. That's all is the difference. So
It's a
I do
flow
think,
rather
yeah,
than a prescriptive path.
exactly, right? And I think that's the big difference. Is the word service coming as a concept or a mental thinking or a belief structure that's coming from your self, the small self, or is the service naturally playing in your life on a day-to-day basis, coming from a very deeper big self?
It's kind of like a
That's all is the
submission to a
difference.
greater self, right?
That's all is the difference, because now it could be service today, it can be some other word that we can replace service with.
Hmm.
Right? It can be love, it can be compassion. Compassion, when it comes from our mind and our heart as a human, is completely different from compassion that flows when from a deeper level. Because the compassion that flows from a deeper level can be a
Yeah,
very
think about
fierce grace, can be very fierce. It doesn't feel like it's a very sweet, kind, tender kind of compassion. It can feel extremely fierce too. And
it.
that's where the disconnect is. If we have mental concepts of what compassion needs to be, the true compassion can never open up.
True compassion is raw,
Raw,
right? And
raw.
we see it as that. It's just raw, and because it is so raw, I think we're scared of it.
Yeah, exactly. We're scared of it. Yes, yes.
How do you recommend the overcoming of that fear of
I
our
think, yeah,
vulnerability and being raw and real? Because we're
yeah,
taught, especially in America, right? You've got
yeah,
to be politically correct. You can't do this or that or say this or that. That's just, well, come on. How if we're constrained by all of that, how could we possibly
yeah,
be authentic?
yeah. And I think for me personally, once I let go of all of the belief structures, whether I needed to be this way versus that way, whether I need to express myself authentically or not even express myself authentically, it's very difficult to do this. But any kind of a concepts to do this way or this way stands in the way.
Mhm.
Even the most good concept, right? when when we don't have any concepts there, that's when something operates, and when that operates, there's literally no question whether it's doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and it just feels like it is in alignment. Some people will like it, some people won't like it. I may not like it myself because my conditioning will say, no, that's not the way I need to be doing. But then there's a deeper intelligence. And when when we start becoming instruments, um, it's a different life. It's not a life that I wanted
We got to
to.
figure out how to tune our instrument first.
Yeah,
We can't
you
even, we
just
don't
have
know
to
how to
tune.
play in concert if we're out of
Yeah,
tune.
You
Right.
just have to tune your instruments. And what I have been observing, Zen, is not what I want to do, is what is happening. It's where something is doing. And I remove my hands out of the steering wheel. But I'm very curious to know what's happening. And I feel like I'm aligned with it and it's enjoying. But at the same time, it's got nothing to do with what I want to do as a personal will. It's something else. And
It
the rest
feels so
of my life.
strange and yet so true.
Yeah, yeah. And the whole journey is to integrate the personal will into that will.
The
And
bridge of the infinite.
there's a lot of resistance there. There's a lot of resistance there. I want it this way versus something, but something intuitively, you know where it's going. Intuitively, I think we all have that feeling that it's going where it's going. And the more I try to resist, the more suffering it is, because after a certain stage you realize you just have to stop resisting
Right.
and let it.
Now, in your positions, this is especially in the corporate world, right? Um, that has the flavor of what's
Yeah,
called leading from behind,
yeah,
right? Where you're just kind of you're looking at what's taking place in front of you without attachment,
yeah,
and you have a sense of where it's going, and so then from that inner perspective of the knowing of where it needs to go without attachment,
yeah,
then gives you the capacity to kind of nudge it because you've opened yourself up to be able to be authentic and real and in the moment and expressive of that. Now, this almost seems to be a greater cohesion of energies, the many energies that we're engaged with that we may not be aware of yet we can sense and feel them.
yeah, yeah.
That also be a sense of being in harmony, because harmony, when we hear harmony, we think of bliss, right? Well, that's not really what it means. Harmony means that you manage chaos well.
That's all. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. That's all it is. So beautifully put. Yeah, yeah,
So does this in this chaotic period, because you're bridging inner and outer, you're working in corporate environments that are leading edge in the world, especially with Amazon Web Services, right? These are areas of where many worlds are merging, and some of them we aren't even aware yet, but magic is happening. How does this how do you see this happening? How can it be better facilitated? And what can we do as individuals to help that flow in our own lives to
yeah,
become present?
yeah. I mean, for me, no matter what corporation or so, at the end of the day, we are dealing with people. People, whether people at work, whether people in my family, whether people in my community, whether people or me itself is who's another human, another person, right? And we all have that inner groundedness, inner connection. And when we start as leaders or as parents or as partners or as community leaders maybe or as like coaches,
Mhm.
the most simplest way is just to listen. A deep listening, not in a way to I'm waiting for my turn to talk, versus just a deep listening.
Kind of the third insight that Redfield shares in Celestine Prophecy. It's just be quiet until you feel that inner prompting to speak.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think the listening is too underrated, right? But I think everything happens through that, because now
And
when
what are we
you
listening to?
really,
Do we have a question, or what are we curious about that we're
yeah,
listening to?
that's all. Yeah, just whatever you're talking, like whatever the other person is talking, no matter what they're saying, because people sometimes talk through their conditioning. Sometimes people are free enough, people are authentic, and sometimes people aren't for whatever reason they are there.
Mhm.
Just listening. And what happens, there's a magic in listening, is the other person opens up. Now they feel it is safe. there's so much power in that, because through listening flows our consciousness, flows our awareness, flows our attention, our presence and love. And for the other person, for them, for a second, they don't have to prove to get our attention. They don't have to do anything to get our attention. All they have to do is just feel safe. The minute they are safe, something within them starts flowing. And now there's a beautiful inner connection that happens. Ideas get formed, businesses start opening, creativity just naturally flows. There's a big energy that is there. A creative potential starts flowing in. And I think as leaders, probably this is what is needed. Like, I think right now, if you see all the conscious leadership, leading with empathy, is all about
Emotional intelligence.
emotion. Just listen, because most of the times we ourselves are not in a state to listen. We are in a state like, okay, how can I talk next? Okay, how can I make my point?
Well, yeah, we're in the process. We're pushing and pulling energy to get where we want, instead of just being okay with what is and allowing what it needs to be. You know, it's like years ago, I was told that everything would be there at its appointed time.
Yeah.
So that has nothing to do with me, right? And nor does any of our other events have anything to do with us specifically. However, it's the act of showing up, of being available, of, you know, and, you know, for me, it's like stepping into the executive director role for the global peace movement that I'm helping to facilitate now. Live and let live. It sounds so simple, and so, you know, the phrase is just so catchy. And with 2 items of it covering moral and legal aspects, this is where, you know, most peace movements seem to just want to have this, I don't want to say, you know, the kumbaya attitude, right? Can't we all just get along? Well, that's great. However, in order to do that, we've got to calibrate the laws that remove all the aggression that keeps us from that.
From that, exactly.
Now, that's a long-term process. It involves politics, legislation. Right now, politics is just, it's a kiss of death when you talk to people about being involved in it, right? Because we don't trust it. We don't trust the process that you mentioned earlier, right? So then the moral side, the live, so that's the let live side, you know, don't be an aggressor. And the live side then is be a good human. So this gives us the opportunity to help, to nurture, to grow, to become this vibrant collective that then can facilitate change, because those, you know, like anything, the statistics play out, right? You've got those 4th and 5th standard deviation people that are on the fringes waiting to step in and play their roles. Stage hasn't been set yet for them to come in and be moved into those places that are prepared for them. At least this is kind of, you know, if you're looking at the big picture and you see this rolling in, well, what might we see? How might it roll out? And how might we be able to participate more fully in it without fear?
Without fear. First, remove our own fears. That's all it is, right?
Right.
For me, everything is based on an inside-out transformation. What the world is going to be a few years from now, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know if I can comprehend.
Well, yeah, nobody anticipated, expected this, you know, massive sequestration that just took place.
I know, right now.
Nobody, well, maybe a few.
But I think the only thing that we can do, each individual can do, is remove our own fears. And that itself is a huge service by default. A service that happens naturally.
So let's talk about that for a second. We talked about removing them. That's all great. How do we do this? What's the process that you found that works for you and others that you train in that way too, so that we can free ourselves more easily? Because there are, you know, it's one thing to say, oh, I got to let go of my fear. Well,
Yeah. No,
That's
again, as I mentioned, mental level, emotional level, and the somatic level, all three would have to be done. And of course, there are practices, there are inquiry-based practices. There are sometimes meditation practices will help. Sometimes just to calm the nervous system first, and then a lot of inquiry, then a lot of transmutation process, wherein the energy that's converted and stuck and contracted in one way needs to kind of transmute into presence. So there
now
are a
you
lot
and
of
I understand that language very
yeah,
well,
yeah,
right? But
yeah.
how do we break it down to a very simple, like when you have this, when you have a sense of fear, what do you do? Do you ask the questions yourself? Why am I feeling this? What's going on around me? Am I
Yeah,
running
simple.
away?
Yeah,
Threat?
simple question. Yeah. For me, what I teach with my women are, what am I afraid to feel?
Hmm.
What do I fear the most? And sit with those, and you will go through more fear. Sit with those.
Right.
Spend at least like half an hour just by yourself. This is a beautiful self-care. That's all we need to do. Just half an hour every day. What do I fear the most? And of course, sometimes initially it's difficult to do this alone.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
Because
not easy.
there's
So it's always helpful to work with somebody, to somebody who can give you that space. I help a lot of PTSD people too. Um, and then it's very difficult for them to feel safe, first of all, right? So with somebody who has gone through similar journeys, similar experiences, the minute we give them a safe space by listening and being there and being present and saying that it's okay, you can open up, giving them the acceptance, giving them that embracing, giving them that compassion, giving them just by being. That's all. We don't have to force it, fake it, or anything. Just by listening, something within you starts operating, and then they connect to that, and then they start opening up. And then once the opening begins, they feel safe that it's okay to be vulnerable. That's the key. It's okay to be vulnerable. Then naturally the part of surrendering happens more and more and more and more. And then the different parts, the fragments of us that we as humans are fragmented, the integration of that happens, slowly happens. So you need some kind of a grounding initially, so that all of those parts start integrating the fragments. And that grounding is healing, is meditation, is a safe place. Once they are a little bit more grounded in that space, I think the rest of the integration, life will take it. If you are present today in the life, the way it is, the triggers that are there happening every second for us, that itself is a beautiful opportunity for us to awaken more and more into our depth. What is not available in today's world for us to trigger? Like, there's always a button that can get pushed. And that's all it is, that journey. And the more and more.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. The
No,
more and
no,
more.
yeah.
Well, how did this fear of even starting the process,
Yeah.
right? That seems to be one of the most intimidating factors, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know what it's going to be like. We know that we need it. We're so comfortable with who and how we are currently, that this change, what's it going to be like? How's life going to
Yeah.
change? Am I still going to have friends? Is my relationship going to be all right? Am I still going
Yeah.
to have a job? Right?
Yeah.
These kinds of things. Or am I going to turn into this superhuman being that can do and be anything that they want, or be
Yeah.
and do anything that they
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
as a
See,
result?
people who have those questions come from a very spiritual background, because somehow spirituality has made us believe that the more and more you go into these levels of consciousness, you're kind of cut off, or there is just this concept, and maybe those concepts really helped the spiritual folks to, because you do go through certain levels of consciousness. We do experience that, right? But then there is always getting back to normalcy, getting back to your natural state.
Mhm.
And natural state is something that we all have experienced. And that's what this whole journey, no matter how spiritual you are, Adya Shanti, I don't know if you've heard about him, a Zen teacher, Adya Shanti.
Mhm.
He says there's a time that comes wherein you have to just let go of your spirituality too. And letting go of the spiritual identity is a very difficult part for a lot of people who are on the spiritual journey for a long time, right? And that's where all of these questions come, like, will I become the superhuman? Will there be like universal consciousness always happening? It's your natural state. We all have experienced this. It's
Right.
our true nature.
And
And
we're set
true
up to
nature,
do it.
yeah, and it's so simple, right? So when they come to me with those questions, like, this is changing for me, like, will I still be like one of the women that I worked with, I know I am transforming so much. Life is okay now, but what if this happens and that happens, and what if I'm not able to provide to my kids? And the first question that I asked her, why would life not want a mother to provide to her kids? Like, the more and more this work, the transformative work, is getting us to our natural state.
Right.
And what comes out of a motherly identity is always nurturing her kids.
Always.
What comes out of an identity of a wife is always nurturing and supporting her husband. That's a natural state. You will get into that natural state, and everything that you're going to lose is your, I need to be this way, this way, this way, this way. Those
And
are
if
just
I'm
going to
not, I'll
be
be
lost.
rejected, right? I'll
Yeah,
end up
yeah,
out on the street,
that's all.
blah, blah,
It's,
blah.
yeah, it's those. But then what happens then is the more and more they get present with their kids, their relationship with their kids begin to transform. They'll be like, one of my clients said, oh, my kids are listening to me more because I am listening to them more, right? This is
It's
this is a
funny how that
beautiful
reciprocal
transformation.
activity takes place, isn't it?
Yeah, this is such a beautiful transformation. So what I tell them is, look at the transformation that you have got. Your kids weren't listening, and that was triggering her. That was more frustration. It was very difficult for overwhelming to be with the kids. And all you had to do is not train them, just listen to them. And
Mhm.
they are listening more. This is a transformation. Do you want this transformation to continue? Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is what the real transformation is. It's not that you will become completely some new identity. Yes, you can if you hold on to it. But that's not where this is going. You can't ultimately you can't hold on to anything. And it's natural. It's natural for you, natural for me. And what is the fear there, right? And I think it's I went through my own set of fears. Now I can talk this way, but every stage to let go of an identity was almost like a death,
Oh,
like a psychological death,
I
right?
can totally relate. The first year I had my experience and I had the
Yeah.
psychiatrist that recognized it. He also told me to keep my mouth shut because others wouldn't understand me. Well, I don't do that well. And the following year I shared the same. I got beat up at a frat house. That was in college and I ended up in the hospital and my parents decided to commit me because the message wasn't getting through. I was trying to explain things, the articulation that I was having, and of course
Yeah.
the silly stuff that I was doing in the outer world certainly didn't help either.
Yeah.
But I wasn't being self-destructive to that end. However, with the same information that I shared with the psychiatrist in the hospital, total flip in the perception.
Yeah.
He then labeled me a manic depressive paranoid schizophrenic and put me on 2,000 milliliters or milligrams of Thorazine a day.
Wow.
Now, here's this completely, 1 year to the next,
Yeah.
total flip of experience with the same thing, the same truth, the same understanding, the same yearning to be heard.
Yeah.
And one listened, the other didn't, or only listened from his frame of reference.
Their framework, yeah.
Right, and this is the thing that I think you kind of encapsulated, didn't really come out say it, but when we look at things, we only see them from the views that we're capable of seeing them from.
Yeah.
Especially if we've been trained as a clinician, we're only going to see things through the DSM-4 or 5 or whatever that is now.
Yeah.
And we're not looking at, okay, what else is available that we're not aware
Yeah.
of, the possibilities to explore. Obviously, there is an intelligence that's operational here, that there's some things happening that we may not understand and from a science or medical standpoint.
Yeah.
However, from an experiential standpoint,
You know
these
it.
things are happening.
Yeah.
So what more is possible if we just ask better questions and shut up?
Yeah. Yeah. So, so true. So true. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Now, I know I'm not the only one that's had those kinds of experiences, and that's part of one of the reasons why I'm doing the show, because folks like us and you, right, probably went through all of that fear and had some challenges in your, let's say, nuclear environment,
Yeah.
whether it was family or coworkers or what have you. There's this challenge to sanity,
Yeah.
right? Or how we appear to others in that process that haven't had that capacity to not, we all have the capacity, haven't made the choice to explore or had the trauma events in their lives that precipitated that exploration.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned specifically that this kind of the somatic trauma that you work with, right? This body, the cellular memory that we have that keeps us in that constrictive state because
Yes.
we do have that fear. We want to protect ourselves. Well,
Yeah.
the ultimate protection is none.
See, that's the biggest realization. And when you have that realization, that's all done.
Right.
There's no protection. Yet we still care. We still try to protect ourselves. And that's the paradox. That's the paradox.
Mhm. Now, how recognizing that paradox, and I have a couple of purple ones, by the way. Um, there are some things that we need to understand in order to get through this at very simple levels. What could you share that would help others on an individual, daily, moment-to-moment basis, that simple things that they could do, or here we go into the doing again, right?
Yeah, which is fine too. Which is fine too, unless until certain point. Like, they say you just knock. You have to go to a place to knock on the door.
Hmm.
That is what we do. And when the door opens is when we just fall into that being. But till we go there, we probably have to do certain things that will at least take us in the direction of being, not away from the direction of being. So doing is good. We can meditate until we realize that we don't have to meditate. You see?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's okay to do till
Right.
we realize
So
we don't
what I
have
hear
to.
you saying is we need to get out of this idea that everything is prescriptive,
Yeah.
and that there are some ways to just follow that natural flow of energy in the ways that it shows up in our lives. Because it
Yeah.
appears you find that in that place when you're asking the question of, okay, what's next? That it's
Yeah.
actually right in front of you.
Right in front of you. That's the most simplest answer. Yet, do I plan what I want to do? Yes.
Mhm.
Do I just live in the flow? Yes. How do I decide whether I plan or live in the flow? That decision maker needs to get out of the way.
Strategy.
So that, yeah, so that decision maker, when that's the personal will, when that gets out of the way, the natural instinct will plan when it needs to plan, will go with the flow when it needs to go with the flow. That's the paradox. You don't know which one needs to happen at what time.
Mhm.
But if you let your personal will get out of the way, something else starts operating. And that's
Absolutely.
beautiful.
Now we're talking about this, and this sounds all well and good, warm, fuzzy, right? Inclusive, embracing, expansive, and all of that. But when we're dealing, like when you're dealing with Amazon Web Services and the team of people that you work with, or for instance, with me, with some of the partnering workshops I've done with building road and bridge construction projects, we're dealing with multi-million-dollar environments.
Yeah, I would not talk a little bit about my workplace and these. We don't have to talk much about those. We'll keep this
It
separate.
it just happens, right?
Yeah,
Because you're there in that place. So there's So what I now hear you saying is that there are others who have gone through their own awareness gathering, right? And come to that place with an understanding that doesn't have to be spoken or articulated. It's demonstrated by the activity, the
That's
being.
all it is. That's all it is. We don't have to speak. We don't have to say. And again, it's just humans. It's a human to human connection, no matter where we are dealing with whoever we are dealing. It's a human to beautiful human to human connections, whether it's your peers, whether it's your leadership team, or whether it's somebody who reports to you, whether it's your children or your spouse or your community. And I think as long as that connection is there, you feel effortless, you feel good. And the minute you feel good and things are just happening naturally, the next step of actions just come in there. And I think the whole awakening journey removes that identity that is trying to figure it out, you see? Right?
Well put.
That's all. That's all it is. Because now all of these questions are like, how do I behave versus here in my job or my life as an entrepreneur? I help as a coach. That fear, that identity itself, when is not there, what does it fear? Right? So
Putting it, it's like from what I'm hearing you saying, and I use the terms attention, intention, and interaction. Where you focus on, you can allow yourself to just be in that place. And you come in, you've got the skill set, you've got the understanding, you've got all the details
yeah.
that are necessary to perform well, if not at peak and beyond, which ultimately brings a sense of joy. And
Yeah, and even peak too. Why not peak? Like when we are operating in ultimate presence, the peak potential naturally flows. And all our work is just to ground ourselves in that layer when the peak, because that's where the shift is from masculine to feminine energy is it just flows. It just and again, peak potential for me is creative ideas just flowing in, no matter what you do, where you are. Like you're going and I'm speaking on a stage, and it's like sometimes I prepare, sometimes I just let go and then see what shows up.
right.
And I'm surprised by what comes out. I don't know. So I think it's just presence. And for me, the most important question that I usually tell people is ask a question: am I avoiding this presence? Am I doing something to avoid? What am I avoiding? Am I avoiding this moment? Because all the time we do things to avoid this present moment. And the more and more we feel that, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this.
Right.
Am I avoiding this present moment? I think our mind, body,
Sure.
heart, everything comes aligned at that
Would a better
second.
question maybe be, how can I more enjoy this moment rather than
Yeah,
how am I
yeah,
avoiding it?
that
Because
could be too.
that,
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
and yeah, there's a fine line there, but you're thinking that where's your attention, right? Your attention is on
yeah,
what you're doing to avoid it, instead of you putting your attention on what could be more
yeah.
explorative.
Yeah, yeah. For me, that question feels a little bit again doing. Like putting the attention is again a doing for me. For
Mhm.
me, the where I see and where my perspective is, where do I stop the doing? So everything that I was doing was a resistance to this present moment. That's all it is.
Mhm.
And the question, what am I avoiding, means, oh, I'm doing something to avoid. Because when there is no avoidance, when there is no resistance, you're naturally attentive,
Right.
naturally
You're not
joyful.
caught up in the past or the future thinking about
Nothing.
what has been,
Yeah,
what might show
yeah,
up here, or how that might affect the future.
yeah,
You're actually able to
yeah.
be in the
Because
present.
then
Oh, it's-
attention, intention, interaction, all of it naturally happens.
Yep, absolutely.
Beautiful.
Sunitha, this has just been phenomenal conversation. I totally appreciate who you are, how you express, the ability that you have to help transform lives, and the evidence of it in your own. It's a real honor to have the pleasure of the
It's a
conversation.
real honor to talk to you, hear your perspective. I love the humor that you have, even in a journey on a journey like this. Loved, enjoyed our deep conversations, deep
You got to
connection.
have fun.
Thank
You're
you
doing
so
something
much.
wrong,
I
right?
know, yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Zen. I truly, truly appreciate being here.
Thank
Very
you.
grateful to you.
Awesome, Sunitha. And I'll have your TED Talk and things listed below the description. And thank you
Thank
again.
you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
And namaste.
Namaste.
And in la catch a la kin, which is the full statement. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I'll see you next time.